Chasing Fame, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it!
Let's go!
CBS mornings, starting at 7.
Within a month, the public will have everything that we've found, all the evidence.
This horrendous abuse of power is the latest in a long series of witch hunts.
I am a never again Trumper. Why? Because I want to win, and we lose with Trump.
It would be foolish to think that such a day where marriage equality is overturned by the Supreme Court could never come.
No one should be treated differently under the law.
We can disagree with Supreme Court decisions, but we can't disobey them.
I hereby pardon. I hereby pardon. Yes. I hereby pardon chocolate and chip.
It simply would not be Thanksgiving week in Washington, D.C. without the ceremonial and traditional pardoning of two turkeys with nominally cute names. This year's entrance into that logbook of pardoned turkeys, chocolate and chip. That was President Biden presiding on the South Lawn of the White House. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett, coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. I'm so glad you are joining us. As you might expect, there is more fallout tonight from Attorney General Merrick Garland's Friday announcement naming a special counsel, Jack Smith, to oversee the Justice Department's ongoing investigations into former President Donald Trump. These investigations cover the alleged mishandling of classified documents found at the former president's private home and club in Florida, and another investigation. Did any person or entity intentionally interfere with the peaceful transfer of power on January 6, 2021? All of this could, of course, take months, but the January 6 Select Committee is preparing to make its findings public much sooner. Appearing Sunday on Face the Nation, Congresswoman and January 6 committee member Zoe Lofgren of California said this about the committee's timeline.
Within a month, the public will have everything that we've found, all the evidence, for good or ill. And I think we've, as we've shown in our hearings, made a compelling presentation that the former president was at the center of the effort to overturn a duly elected election, assembled the mob, sent it over to Congress to try and interfere with the peaceful transfer of power. It's pretty shocking.
Of course, the Select Committee is likely to come to an end soon as Republicans take control of the House. For more on all this, I want to talk to our two colleagues. Scott MacFarlane joins me here in the Washington, D.C. bureau, and joining me here at the desk, our political director, Serafin Gomez. Scott, I want to talk to you briefly about what you've heard and what specifics you can add to the committee's likely timeline for that full public report.
This is a committee that is quickly running out of time, Major. Their duties end at the end of this calendar year when this Congress ends, which means they have less than 6 weeks to finish up some pretty big tasks, including the release of that voluminous final word written report, which they have pledged will be comprehensive and which they've indicated could include all the transcripts of all their depositions, including with key players. They've got to get that done in the next 6 weeks, and I've had circled on my calendar the end of next week, December 1st and December 2nd, because in the legislation forming this committee, Major, the Congress requires the committee to wrap up its work 30 days after it writes its final report and issues that final report. December 1st and December 2nd are 30 days before the end of this Congress. What's more, the chairman of the committee, Benny Thompson of Mississippi, has said, Major, they hope to send this thing to the printers by November 30th, which dovetails nicely into the end of next week.
So obviously, Scott, this has been written as it has been developed, true?
Yeah, and I think we can expect some nuggets of news that we haven't heard so far, in part because there were certain teams of January 6 committee investigators who were assigned to investigate the security failures at the Capitol that day, to chase the money trail. And we haven't heard much about those at the committee's hearings. So presumably that'll be a component of this final written report, which will have some revelations about those two threads.
Scott, as you well know, it was a heavy news week in Washington last week. Among the developments, current House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announcing she will not seek a leadership position in the new Congress. Same thing for Steny Hoyer. And other House Democrats volunteered themselves as a kind of new slate at the top. What's happened since, and has anything about what has or hasn't happened surprised you?
Yeah, it's been about 72 hours since we got that new slate of likely House Democratic leadership contenders, and we've gotten nothing else since. Major, the silence has been deafening over this weekend because one of the rules of leadership battles is you get in early and you get in strong. These three have gotten in early. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, who's been representing New York City for about 10 years, seeking to be the House Democratic leader, would be the highest-ranking black member of Congress ever if he secures the position. Catherine Clark of suburban Boston, seeking to be the House Democratic whip, would become the highest-ranking woman in the U.S. Congress. And Pete Aguilar, who serves on that January 6th Select Committee, seeking to be the number 3 leader in the House Democratic caucus. We just haven't heard other names formally announce themselves, and time is running short for that. They're going to meet to pick new leaders November 30th, December 1st. They'll pick their committee ranking members and their leadership team, and days are running short for any alternative candidates.
Speaking of former speakers, I want to run this soundbite by you, Finn Gomez, from former Speaker Paul Ryan. He appeared over on one of our network competitors this weekend at a Sunday talk show, talking about what he describes himself to be as a never-again Trumper. Let's roll that.
What we now know, it's pretty clear, is with Trump we lose. So I don't mean this personally. It's just evidence. We lost the House in 18. We lost the presidency in 20. We lost the Senate in 20. And now in 2022, we should have and could have won the Senate. We didn't. And we have a much lower majority in the House because of that Trump factor. So I think it's palpable right now. We get past Trump, we start winning elections. We stick with Trump, we keep losing elections.
Is it palpable, Finn Gomez, among Republicans that sticking with Trump is a losing strategy?
Well, I think what you're seeing with former Speaker Ryan also is that this has gone back for a while, this acrimony they've had between these two. He's declaring himself a never-again Trumper. He has been a never-Trumper for a while. And frankly, he's now joining a growing chorus within the Republican Party that has been critical over former President Trump's campaigning, the candidate equality issue when it comes to the midterms, and the underperformance by the Republican Party over those elections. So now what you're seeing is, yes, there's been an erosion of support for the former president, and I think that there is going to be more criticism and even more people jumping into the potential 2024 field.
Some of that pointed criticism came at the Republican Jewish Coalition's annual conference this weekend in Las Vegas. I want to play for you, Finn, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. One more time, control room, could we have former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie?
Donald Trump picked candidates with one criteria. Only one. Not electability, not experience, not wisdom, not charisma, not the ability to govern. But do you believe the 2020 election was stolen or not? If you do, I endorse you. If you don't, I reject you. Well, let me tell you, that's not what this party stands for. It's not what it should stand for in the future. And we've got to stop up and stop it now.
Finn, highly specific and on an issue that the former governor is correct. It was a litmus test for former President Trump. And it appears, based on the verdict delivered not by me or any other pundit, but by the voters, a damaging one.
Absolutely. And it was something that was talked about extensively. My sources at the RJC, at the RGA, the Republican Governors Association, before that, it was a hot topic. The blame that is now being presented towards the former president for these losses. And it's growing. Christie was one of the few people that actually mentioned Donald Trump's name, I want to say. But part of the Trump strategy for jumping in early was to freeze the field. It clearly has not done that. There have been his former cabinet members, his former vice president, his former secretary of state, were all there in Las Vegas on the RJC and positioning themselves for potential runs in 2024. It was not a freeze. It was not even a cold snap, Major. There are people that it's a potentially growing 2024 field.
Scott MacFarlane, on election night in our special report coverage, you talked at great length and specified the number of election deniers who were on the ballot. Many of them lost, but some of them won. Listening to Governor Christie, do you think that is going to be resonant in this new Republican Congress and there will be a pulling away from the denialism agenda?
Some of the congressmen and congresswomen-elect with whom I've spoken since they got here to Washington for the orientation, we're not talking about election denialism. They may have been distancing themselves from their own earlier views in avoiding that topic. But it's also hard to get around Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and so far, Georgia, where Trump selected nominees who won their primaries, who were election deniers, did not fare well. You saw what happened in Arizona. Michigan, the entire top of the ticket were people who we categorize as election deniers. Same is true in Pennsylvania. All of them lost. In Georgia, Trump's choice to run for governor lost the primary to Brian Kemp, and his choice for the U.S. Senate is now forced into a runoff. There's just not a track record in competitive races to keep this topic germane and relevant, to keep it among the chatter here at the Capitol. I'm surprised over the past 2.5 weeks how little talk there's been about election fraud among those who are returning here in January.
Scott MacFarlane, there's little track record politically. There's also no fact basis behind it. Finn Gomez, Scott MacFarlane, thank you so very much. Same-sex marriage was once an issue that fell along deeply partisan lines. It is now on its way to being codified into federal law with bipartisan support. What that could mean for other social issues and our politics more broadly. That's coming up next. You are streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future?
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
When weather turns extreme,
Massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane.
every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it! Let's go!
CBS mornings, starting at 7.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett. The Senate took a significant step toward passing a same-sex marriage bill last week. The Respect for Marriage Act advanced with bipartisan support, 12 Republican senators voting in favor, along with every Democrat. The vote is raising some questions about whether views of same-sex marriage are shifting within the Republican Party. This bill would also, we should note, provide protections for interracial marriages. For more on this, I want to bring in David French. David is the senior editor at The Dispatch, and if he doesn't mind me saying so, kind of a thought leader on the intersection of morality, pluralism, and politics. David, it's good to have you with us.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So your reaction to Senate passage of this legislation and on the issue writ large?
Yeah, the thing that's really important about this legislation is that it really tries to harmonize two sides of the divide. On the one side are the folks that are worried about whether Obergefell v. Hodges, the case that constitutionalized same-sex marriage in 2015, is going to survive the current Supreme Court. And then those who are very concerned about religious freedom in a nation where gay marriage is protected by law. And so what this bill does is, on the one hand, it says that if you're married in one state, then another state has to recognize that marriage, can't discriminate against it on the basis of, for example, sex or race or sexual orientation. And at the same time, it preserves the protections of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It preserves and protects tax exemptions for example, religious organizations that maintain traditional religious views of marriage. It says that nonprofit organizations are not going to be required. Religious nonprofits, for example, aren't going to be required to participate in same-sex marriages. So it really, in my view, is an example of pluralism at work, where you have two different sides of a very important question, one that is deeply felt by millions and millions of people, and it does at least something to preserve the liberties of both sides of the divide.
Pluralism is one of our overarching goals in this constitutional republic, and I want to run for you, David, something that Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said today to our colleague Chris Van Cleve about the Club Q mass shooting this weekend and the larger atmosphere around some of these underlying issues. Please take a listen.
It was a place of belonging. It was a place of community, and it came under attack at a time when the entire LGBTQ community is coming under attack. And if anybody claims to be surprised that political attacks on a community that doesn't hurt anybody are sometimes followed by violent physical attacks on that same community, I just don't think they're being honest.
So you think the political discourse that's going on now is a contributing factor to this kind of violence?
You can't target a group to be feared and to be hated. A group, by the way, that never did anything to you, but is politically convenient to attack. And then act surprised when a disturbed person, or who knows, goes out and follows that through with physical violence.
David, I'm not going to burden you with trying to reconcile these two things. The United States Senate moving toward putting into federal law protections for same-sex marriage, and a mass shooting in a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs, Colorado. But the juxtaposition is incredibly jarring.
It is a jarring is a good word. It is a jarring juxtaposition. And I think what Secretary Buttigieg said that was important there, and I want to qualify by saying there's a lot we have to learn about this specific attack, right? So there's a lot to be learned there. But let's speak in generalities for a moment. It is generally true that we have had rapidly escalating kinds of political rhetoric. That is absolutely true. We have seen rapidly escalating threat environments. We just saw, for example, in the election context, that a Maricopa County official had to be moved to an undisclosed location. We have seen circumstances where there have been mass shootings. For example, the Tree of Life Synagogue. We have seen mass shootings at an El Paso, Texas Walmart. We have seen them in places like Buffalo, New York, where that rhetoric, there was a political idea attached to those shootings. And so I do think it is absolutely important for a nation where people have deep convictions to express them with conviction, yes, but with respect for the humanity of their opponents. And one of the things that's terrible about our new social media environment is that it rewards outrage. It rewards those individuals who will constantly escalate the rhetoric. And we have seen escalating rhetoric against LGBT individuals in the United States. There's this groomer smear that is flung all over the internet that is vile. It's just vile. And so I do think it is critically important for us to learn to express disagreement over the most hot button of issues with dignity, with respect for the dignity of others, with respect for the humanity of others, without abandoning underlying convictions.
And just to wrap up our first question, David, I would think you would regard what the Senate has done and what legislation is about to land on the president's desk in this regard as an expression of what you just called for. Not the courts deciding this, but the legislative body of our constitutional republic putting all these things together and doing so in a way that balances lots of competing interests.
Exactly. So you have two different sides that a lot of their interests are advanced by this legislation through bipartisan compromise. And there used to be a time when a bipartisan pieces of legislation were the norm. Now it's extremely unusual to see important legislation to be so bipartisan. And here's one where you respect religious liberty and you provide concrete protections for religious liberty at the same time that you ease the concerns of those hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans who are in same-sex marriages who worry about a court decision at some undefined future time that could be incredibly disruptive and wrenching in their lives.
David French, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Coming up on Red and Blue, fears of a rail strike are on the horizon after a failed union deal. We are breaking down what's at risk. You're streaming Red and Blue.
Thinking about it.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
I'm thinking about it.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
Massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane.
every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
people from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women.
What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done?
We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett. One of the country's largest railroad workers' unions has rejected a new contract, and this is renewing fears of a potentially economically devastating strike. The tentative deal between a dozen unions and major U.S. freight companies was, you might remember, brokered with some fanfare by the Biden administration back in September. 7 unions voted for it, but this agreement needs the approval from all 12 participating unions to prevent workers from going on strike December 9th. Should that happen, meaning a strike, there are estimates it could cost the U.S. economy up to $2 billion a day. Senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now from the North Lawn of the White House. Weijia, what is the latest?
Well, Major, you're absolutely right in that this has to be an all-or-nothing deal. All 12 unions have to agree to it, and today the largest of them said no. So even though the agreement does include a 24% increase in wages over 5 years, it also puts a cap on some health care costs. The real sticking point here is paid sick leave, which of course is something that the Biden administration has pushed for and supports broadly ever since the president came into office. And so this is why the majority of workers are holding out and asked whether the White House is still involved, whether the president himself is going to be intervening. A White House official just says that, you know, the president, as he always has, believes that a strike would be unacceptable because it would hurt so many people. Also saying that they believe the best option is for all the parties to sort this out themselves. So not directly answering how much involvement there is, but certainly this timing is pretty terrible because so many consumers are already dealing with inflation and high prices. And if there is a strike, with 30% of the freight in this country moving by rail, if these goods, if groceries, if other supplies can't get to the shelves, you can imagine what that will do to the prices as well. And so the conversations continue. The president today said that he will be talking about it today, but so far it's unclear if they'll be able to hammer this out before the early December deadline.
It's hard to imagine the labor guy, the president's words, not mine, the train guy, the president's words, not mine, describing himself would be on the sidelines as this drama unfolds. It was kind of a busy weekend at the White House, Weijia, for the social secretary and anyone paying attention to the White House. We had the president's 80th birthday. We had the wedding of his granddaughter, Naomi. We had the Christmas tree arriving today, the pardoning of the turkeys. What a flurry of activity.
It's very exhausting when you put it that way, looking at that schedule. But yes, it was a very busy and festive weekend for President Biden, who, as you mentioned, celebrated his 80th birthday yesterday with just a family brunch. Of course, the White House did not exactly want to broadcast this particular birthday, which makes him the oldest president in history. But there's a picture of him enjoying his coconut cake. This was the day after his granddaughter, Naomi, daughter to Hunter Biden, got married right here at the White House. And yes, today, even more sweets involving chocolate and Chip, the two very lucky turkeys who were pardoned by the president. It is a combination of his favorite ice cream flavor. They were sent off to North Carolina to live out the rest of their lives in peace and, in the pasture instead of landing somewhere else. And the Christmas tree is here. It's being decorated in the Blue Room, which I'm sure you know well, having covered this White House. It really is stunning. And it is a festive time. In fact, the president was making jokes, Major, saying that all the ballots for Chip and chocolate were verified, and that the only red wave would be when his German Shepherd tipped over the cranberry sauce during Thanksgiving. So he's in a good mood.
Tipping over the cranberry sauce, and 2 pardoned turkeys living out the remainder of their natural lives in North Carolina, not, as Ouija just said, somewhere else.
Somewhere else.
We all know where that somewhere else would be. Ouija Jang, we thank you so very much from the North Lawn. Well, that does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And here's a quick reminder, a helpful one. If you want to watch previous episodes of this mighty fine program, well, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. All you have to do is head to cbsnews.com/red and blue. And before we say goodnight or farewell, we want to leave you with some of the first images from NASA's Artemis 1 mission. That would be Artemis on the left, the moon on the right, and the little blue marble right next to it.